Hi, Deb, and welcome to the Convene podcast.
Hi, thanks for having me. Um, I'll tell you a story about Lehman and the moment when we found out the news that Lehman would be no longer the company as we knew it. I was actually planning a 5-city, 5-day event where I was going to be traveling to 5 different European cities on the Monday when we were in the office and we were told, please pack up your desk, you no longer have a job. Fortunately, the first city was London, and that's where I was. In that moment, though, and there was total chaos and madness, and no one knew what to do and what's happening. I remember very distinctly sitting at my desk and knowing that I had a huge amount of clients waiting to attend an event for the next week. And I had to act and think, what is the right thing to do here? And so it was a really interesting process to go through how we communicated with all of our vendors, how we communicated with the clients, even though people were literally packing up their boxes and leaving and just walking out the door. So I knew at that point, even though I had never imagined something like that had happened, it was a great lesson to know that, sometimes these things are so unexpected. And what are your core values and how are you going to behave or act in that moment?
So, what has all of that taught you about leadership under pressure? Have you changed the way you approach your teams and your clients? What have you observed?
Yeah, I think, pressure has really sort of taught me about remaining, trying to really refine those skills around remaining calm, um, being able to deliver clarity to the team, and also being able to make decisions under pressure. And unfortunately, I think you only get better at these things by going through those tough moments. It's not about having all the answers immediately. And as I said, you could never think of every outcome. But it's really about creating clarity when things are moving really, really quickly. There are so many instances, and I know that other event planners listening will also always be thinking about their moment or their stories from when they've had some really, really tricky times. And the stories that come to my mind is, dealing with a situation going live with a speaker and a very visible leak coming out of the central chandelier in the ballroom of water, which I was sort of thinking, how am I going to stay calm here? But the show had to go on. So that was again an early lesson. Another one when we were doing a dinner in a desert, and very unexpectedly, the wind came up very, very quickly. And within half an hour, we were serving dinner in basically a sandstorm. Um, there was absolutely no way through it. It was probably one of the worst experiences of my career at the time. But now I talk about it a lot because honestly, I remember very viscerally thinking the only thing I can do here is literally put one foot in front of the other. And, it really, really tested me on how to communicate with people that I really needed to in that moment. And again, all of those things around safety, making sure that we were delivering something that was certainly memorable, and that we were really calm under pressure. Interestingly, at the end of that dinner, um, this is so odd to me. Nobody mentioned about the sand, that I'm sure people were eating sand at some point. Nobody really talked about it. They talked that it was windy, but no one really complained. And I actually really put that down to the team, and that we were all, you know, getting on with things. We were calm, putting one foot in front of the other and delivering it as we needed to.
When you're coming from the financial services sector, which is associated with a lot of governance and controls and risk management. And I wonder, how do you balance that need for rigorous oversight with the need to create engaging, memorable event experiences?
Yeah, I guess it always is a balance. It's something that should happen in the background and still make the experience feel completely seamless. And so that, our attendees are not feeling overburdened by it. But again, it is something that we just see integral into everything that we're doing, right? It is how we protect the brand, it's how we protect the client, the business, communities that we work in. So, that attention to governance and control and risk management is just is just what we live and breathe. In fact, at the bank, we are a control function. We are there alongside our legal and compliance department, our, HR, all of these different teams. We're a control function because it's so important. I think that good governance should also create confidence and not friction. And we're constantly working at our processes to find that balance as well.
Those moments when something happens and you have to react on the moment, on the spot. But when uncertainty simply increases, what are the first questions you ask yourself before making a major event decision?
When uncertainty increases, probably I'm thinking about what problem are we trying to solve? Do I want to say what problem? Maybe what business objective are we trying to solve for? Um, After that, again, it's coming back to those fundamentals. What are the risks? What assumptions have changed? What are the non-negotiables? What options? I definitely think around who needs to be aligned. These are the types of things I think in times of uncertainty is that we're considering. I feel like I'm like on an ongoing journey around communication. And I feel like if any of my team members were listening, they'd be like, oh, God, she's talking about it again. And what I mean is like judgment and communication. Um, Really going deep into communication skills. So communication is such a broad term, and I do think it can be put into that soft skills category. But I honestly believe it is a core operating capability. The way you brief stakeholders, the way you align with partners, manage expectations, the way you influence decisions, communicate under pressure, talked about that. It can completely change the outcome of an event. So, for myself personally, my own personal development, in the last however many years, I actually try and go deep on one facet of communication. Um, and at the moment, I'm trying to really think about listening. And I don't actually mean just about like listening to, what you're saying to me today and like, but I'm also like listening into cues, body language, and again in the Asia Pacific region, um, a l- I don't speak all of the languages. I barely speak any other language, but I actually realize that I've become pretty good at looking at non-verbal cues, body language, etc., tone, and so the art of listening is like my little hobby at the moment of like reading articles and being really observant, watching in meetings, even when we're in a virtual setting, looking at people's body language and how I adjust my style in that moment. Um, so that's focus. In the past, I've gone through times where I've focused on really thinking carefully about how I align with different stakeholders to help me get my message across. That's another facet of communication through a third party, I suppose, if you like, or partnering with people to help you with your communication. That's been incredibly powerful for me. And also, I have had times where I've really like focused in on presentation skills, which I remember the year I distinctly did that in one of my goal settings. I said, I'm going to accept every presentation opportunity I can this year. And so many times throughout the year, I thought, why? on the eve of having to do a panel discussion, I was like, why did I accept this? This is awful. And I felt so nervous. I learned a lot about power poses that year. I don't know if you know about them. Yeah. Power
Yeah, but
poses
if you
like
want to expand.
totally going into the bathroom and like standing in a hero pose or doing a Superman pose. I mean, I just thought this is absolutely bizarre. And I remember being thrown in the deep end on something very last minute. I was clutching at straws to try and think of something to give me the confidence and stop my nerves. I locked myself in the bathroom and for 5 minutes did some hero poses. I honestly think it helped me. Um, so, these different things of communication, I'm trying to be way more intentional. And it doesn't mean I ended that year being perfect at presenting. It doesn't mean that I'm now well on my way to being a better listener. I'm a talker, much better at talking than listening. So this is why this might be a multi-year focus. But I think the point is it's a journey. And I really, really am focused on that for myself. But what I would also say is really trying to empower others and building their confidence to communicate with clarity and authority. And that's something I feel quite passionate about.
So you're going to SEMA Summit next, and you'll be joining fellow global event leaders to discuss what you're navigating right now during a panel discussion. What's one challenge you believe event leaders should be talking about more openly?
Um, Look, I think, and Sheriff talks a lot about this. Our sheriff from PCMA talks a lot about this around really our role in the bigger our role in society in a bigger sense. And I mean, that sort of sounds like a very grand statement. He is that passionate about it, and I think inspires us all to be like that. But I couldn't agree more in the way that I think we need to be talking more about the pace and complexity of decision making that event planners are faced with. And we are often seen in the events industry as execution only. But in reality, we're really sitting at the intersection, if you like, of brand, client engagement, risk, operations, leadership, all of these different things. And, you know, I'm really lucky to be in a position where we work with, all the departments within the bank, and that we are seen absolutely as advisors to the business and how we're engaging and giving real life experiences of our brand and the story that we want to tell and how we bring that into, communities, clients, etc. And we've talked about all of those different elements that you're always having to consider, from security to safety, operationally, the brand, how it's presented. So, this is the piece that I think we need to talk more about, how we get that awareness or visibility.
Just want to thank you very,
Thank
very much
you.
for being on the podcast, for sharing all these insights and inspiring our listeners really to do a little bit more, to listen a little bit better, and to tell their story a little bit more impactful, in a more impactful way.
For sure. Thank you so much for having me, Maggie. It's been so nice to chat to you.
Thank you.